Okay, so we're back here for part 2. We just finished up number 3, and we were talking converse, inverse, contrapositive, switch, negate, switch, and negate. That's how you can remember it. All right, let's take number 4. Write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive for the following conditional. So here's our P implies Q. If Sheila is 14 years old, then she is a teenager. So our hypothesis, I'll put the P up here. Sheila's 14 years old. That's what comes after if. Then she is a teenager. That's the conclusion Q. Now, if you are 14, then you are a teenager. That is a true statement. Okay, so let me put that in red. That is true. All right, so converse means we're going to switch right here. Now I'm going to write this. You don't need to copy it again, but this is symbolically we switch P and Q. So if, I'm going to write if Sheila is a teenager, I'm going to abbreviate TA, then she is 14 years old. Now you may say, why did I keep Sheila's name here? Because if that's part of the hypothesis, doesn't that switch? The answer to that is yes. If I wrote, if she is a teenager, then Sheila's 14, that's fine. But just thinking grammatically, it's easier if you keep the subject at the front. So I did switch. Here's the teenager, that's the conclusion, that's Q, and then here's the hypothesis P. So I did switch it, I just kept her name in front. It's not wrong if you don't. Okay, converse is switch. Inverse is negate. Not P implies not Q. So go back to the conditional. If Sheila is not, you have to negate that, not 14 years old, then she is not a teenager. I have to negate that. She is not ATA. Contrapositive, converse, inverse, contrapositive, switch, negate, switch and negate. Okay, so we're going to say not Q. If, I'll put Sheila first again. If Sheila is not a teenager, then she is not 14 years old. Now let's talk true false on this. The conditional is true. If she's 14, she's a teenager. Yes, that is a true statement. The converse says if Sheila is a teenager, then she is 14. Now that's not necessarily true. You can be a teenager but not be 14. I can think of an example. If you are 16, then you're a teenager, but you're not 14. If you can think of one, what we call a counter example. If you can think of one situation that is not true, where it's not the case, you must declare false. If it's true 99% of the time, but false 1%, it is a false statement. It has to be true all the time. So the counter example, somebody is 16 years old. They're a teenager, but they're not 14, okay? So that is false. The converse is false. Let's look at the inverse. If Sheila is not 14 years old, then she's not a teenager. Well, myself, Mr. Cavell, I'm not 14 and I'm not a teenager, so that's true for me. But what if you're 17? You're not 14, but you are a teenager. So again, that is false, because I can think of a counterexample where it's not true. Now, the last one, if Sheila is not a teenager, then she is not 14. So if she's not a teenager, she's not 14. Think of someone who's not a teenager, like your parents, or if you have older siblings or younger siblings. If you're 20, you're not a teenager, you can't be 14. So anybody who's not a teenager is not 14 years old. That is true. That has to be true. Okay, so this is a situation where the conditional is true, the contrapositive is true, but the converse and inverse are false. Okay, now, again, what you should do here, I would take number 5, go ahead, stop the video, write the converse, inverse, contrapositive for this statement, this conditional, write down whether you think it's true or false, and then come back on and go ahead and see if you're correct. All right, now I'm going to start it. So if you are in Dubai, that's P, then it does not rain often. That's Q. I would say that's a true statement. If you're in Dubai, it does not rain often. P implies Q. Okay, converse means switch. So if, now this is negated already, so I'm just going to copy that. It's Q implies P. Q implies P. So if it does not, I apologize for my handwriting, if it does not rain often, then you are in Dubai. Okay, inverse is to negate, so not P implies not Q. If you are not in Dubai, then it, okay, now this says it does not rain often, so if I negate that, it does rain often. It does rain often. Okay, so that's the negation there. The last one, contrapositive, is to switch P and Q and negate them. So if it does rain often, then you are not in Dubai. Then you are not in Dubai. Once you've done a few of these, this is actually pretty easy. Okay, you get the pattern and then you just work it out. Okay, so let's talk true, false. Now remember, we can't say true unless it's 100% of the time true. If it does not rain often, then you are in Dubai. Well, it could be, you could be in Dubai. You could also be in the Arizona desert where it does not rain often. So just because it doesn't rain often doesn't mean you're always in Dubai. That's false. Okay, again, example, I could pick another desert. I could pick the Sahara. It doesn't rain often there. All right, inverse. If you are not in Dubai, then it does rain often. Well, what if you're in Abu Dhabi? You're not in Dubai, but it certainly does not rain often in Abu Dhabi. That is false. What's my counter example? Abu Dhabi. You could think of 100 different examples, counter examples. If it does rain often, then you are not in Dubai. Now, if it rains a lot, if it rains often, there's no way that you can be in Dubai. That is a true statement. That is true. Okay, so this is the last part of the lesson. Notice that the conditional, if the conditional is true, the contrapositive is true. If the conditional is true, the contrapositive is true. But the converse and inverse are not always true, not necessarily. They can be, but they may not be. This may be false. But the conditional and the contrapositive are what we call logically equivalent, logically equal. If the conditional, so if conditional is true, contrapositive is true, always. If the conditional is false, the contrapositive would be false. Okay? Now this will come up again in the next lesson. And then the last part here, so a definition of what biconditional is. It's a conjunction, so that means putting two statements together of a conditional statement and its converse. Now we don't do this very often. The symbol for conditional is a double arrow. It goes in both directions. So what happens is that P implies Q and Q implies P, which is the converse, where both of those are working. We actually did an example at the top of the page. The Pythagorean theorem, this is actually the theorem, if a triangle is a right triangle, then the formula has to work. If the formula works, it has to be a right triangle. So the converse is also true to the conditional. That would be a biconditional. Now, the way I can write this, I would say a triangle is a right triangle if and only if. That's how I show it's a biconditional in words. If and only if a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So you don't need to write the conditional and the converse. You can write it at once, but you have to use if and only if. So we don't write if then, because we're going in both directions. We're going in both ways. And this, a biconditional, is true if the conditional and the converse, I'll use the and symbol, and the converse are true. And that is the end of the notes. And last thing, I'll tell you a final joke at the end. Why did the lion eat the tightrope walker? And the answer is, it was craving a well-balanced meal.